You're listening to The Philosopher's Note on the power of TED. More wisdom in less time.
Welcome to The Philosopher's Notes on the Power of TED, the Empowerment Dynamic, by David Emerald. We'll start with a quote. Your life is a kind of laboratory where you're constantly experimenting with your own higher knowing, always increasing your capacity to design the life you choose. Human beings must create. It's hardwired. The question is, are you consciously creating or only sleepwalking through your human life? End quote. So TED's your friend. Seriously, David Emerald's simple, powerful fable, The Power of TED, featuring his uber-wise character Ted, is a life-changing kind of book. In this overview, I'll introduce you to two very different orientations from which we can choose to live: victim and creator. One will land you in the dreaded drama triangle, DDT, and the other will place you squarely where you want to be, in the empowerment dynamic, TED. Ready? Let's jump in. We'll start with the dreaded drama triangle, DDT. Quote, when you inhabit any of these three roles, you're reacting to fear of victimhood, loss of control, or loss of purpose. You're always looking outside yourself, to the people and circumstances of life, for a sense of safety, security, and sanity. End quote. So DDT is poisoning our world. No, not that kind of DDT. We're talking about the dreaded drama triangle here. Adapted from Dr. Stephen Karpman's Drama Triangle, created in the 1960s, the dreaded drama triangle is the toxic mess we find ourselves in too often in our lives. As with any good triangle, the dreaded drama triangle has 3 points. In this case, victim, persecutor, and rescuer. Here's a quick look at them. First, the victim. Emerald says, quote, every victim requires a persecutor, but the persecutor isn't always necessarily a person. The persecutor could also be a condition or a circumstance. A persecuting condition might be a disease or a heart attack or an injury. A persecuting circumstance could be a natural disaster, like a hurricane or an earthquake or a house burning down, end quote. So that's pretty straightforward, eh? As we look at the DDT, we'll see that each of these three positions can't exist without the others. For someone to be a victim, someone or something else has to be a persecutor. It's also interesting to note that, quote, all victims have experienced a loss, a thwarted desire or aspiration, even if they're not aware of it, end quote. And Emerald says, quote, frozen in fear, as a victim, you avoid responsibility because you think your experience is beyond your control. This stance keeps you from making decisions, solving problems, or going after what you want in life. And finally, remember, as Emerald says, quote, victims may be defensive, submissive, over-accommodating to others, passive-aggressive in conflict, dependent on others for self-worth, overly sensitive, even manipulative. They're often angry, resentful, and envious, feeling unworthy or ashamed about their circumstances. Have you ever felt or acted this way? End quote. Well, of course we all have, huh? So the question is, can you think of a time or two when you might have embodied the victim? And as you do that, think about the next character in this DDT, the persecutor. Quote, these people are often authoritarian and rigid in their views, exerting power over others in an effort to keep others from having power over them. Persecutors may act grandiose and self-righteous to mask their own insecurity. End quote. Persecutors, the most easy-to-spot villain in the DDT drama. Although they act tough, keep in mind Emerald's wisdom that, quote, persecutors, like victims, act out of fear. They may seem fearless, but actually persecutors are almost always former victims, end quote. So, here's another question. Can you think of a time or two when you might have embodied the persecutor? And as you do that, think about the third character in the DDT, the rescuer. Quote, a rescuer isn't always a person. Addictions to alcohol or drugs, sexual addiction, workaholism, all the ways we numb out, can rescue the victim from feeling his or her own feelings. End quote. Good old rescuers. I think it's cool how Emerald points out the fact that we can look to things outside of ourselves like alcohol or sex or even TV, anything to rescue us from the feelings of victimhood. Also, quote, persecutors fear loss of control. Rescuers fear loss of purpose. Rescuers need victims, someone to protect or fix, to bolster their self-esteem, end quote. Again, the question, can you think of a time or two when you might have embodied the rescuer? And as we move through this, let's look at the antidote to DDT. Quote, TED, the empowerment dynamic, counteracts the poison of DDT, the dreaded drama triangle. TED is the antidote for DDT, end quote. So now that we've taken a quick look at the three orientations of the dreaded drama triangle, let's take a quick peek at the main characters in its antidote, the empowerment dynamic. So whereas the victim has a persecutor and a rescuer in DDT, TED's triad features a creator with a challenger and a coach. Here's more. The creator. Quote, one of the fundamental differences between the victim orientation and this one, the creator, is where you put your focus of attention. For victims, the focus is always on what they don't want, the problems that seem constantly to multiply in their lives. They don't want the person, condition, or circumstance they consider their persecutor. And they don't want the fear that leads to fight, flee, or freeze reactions either. Creators, on the other hand, place their focus on what they do want. Doing this, creators still face and solve problems in the course of creating outcomes they want, but their focus remains fixed on their ultimate vision. End quote. That's brilliant. So the thing to remember about being a creator is that, quote, the focus in the creator orientation is on a vision or an outcome. You orient your thoughts and actions toward creating what you most deeply want to see or experience in life. End quote. And finally, a creator is vision-focused and passion-motivated. To really live into your creator self, you are called to do the inner work necessary to find your own sense of purpose, whatever touches your heart and holds meaning for you. End quote. All right, so now we're moving on from the creator to the challenger. Quote, all of life's experiences are teachers in some sense, challenging us to grow and evolve. Although the persecutor certainly provokes a reaction, the challenger elicits a response by encouraging the creator to acquire new knowledge, skill, or insight. Both roles provoke change, but in different ways. End quote. Can you see the difference between the persecutor and the challenger? Powerful stuff. We'll go into more detail on how to make the shift between the two soon, but now let's look at the coach. Quote, the coach is the antidote to the victim's rescuer in the DDT. Mainly, a coach supports, assists, and facilitates the creator in manifesting a desired outcome. A coach holds others to be whole, resourceful, and creative. They help you dig deep inside yourself to gain clarity about what you want to create in your life. End quote. To stress the big difference between the rescuer and the coach, the rescuer sees a person as a victim, incapable of getting by without his or her support. The coach, on the other hand, sees the individual they're supporting as a creator, totally capable of rocking it on their own. Big distinction. All right, the next big idea is shift happens. Quote, the way you talk about yourself in your life, your story, has a great deal to do with what shows up in your day-to-day experience. Your thoughts create filters through which you view your life. If you think of yourself as a victim, you filter all that happens to you through the lens of DDT, and you find plenty of evidence to support that viewpoint. That's why the orientation you adopt is so important. It exerts a powerful influence on your life direction. End quote. So all that's nice, but how do we shift from one of the DDT roles and get into the empowered roles when we get stuck? The simple but not easy solution is ask the right question. Quote, living from the creator orientation is actually more challenging. In the victim orientation, I didn't have to exercise conscious choice. I just reacted to my circumstances. End quote. So now we're going to look at the different shifts to go from DDT to TED. The first is victim to creator. If you find yourself showing up as a victim, ask the question, what do I want? Robert Keegan once said that behind every complaint is a deeper commitment. Meaning, if you're complaining about something, that is, being a victim, the complaint simply points to a deeper commitment you have for yourself that is currently being thwarted. For example, if I'm complaining about not having the freedom to pursue my creative ideas, in putting someone or something in the position of persecutor, I need to recognize that I'm falling into victim mode and ask myself, what do I want? In this case, the answer would be something like, I want more freedom to create. The moment we ask that question, what do I want, we've shifted our focus from the problem to the vision and solution. We're no longer helpless victims in the clutches of some persecutor, but creators dealing with a challenger or challenging situation. That's a really powerful shift. Then here's another shift from persecutor to challenger. This one happens to be my personal favorite. So I tend to challenge myself and others, and I find that when I'm not living up to my own ideals, I can really easily fall into the persecutor role. The question to ask when I witness this, what is my intention? If I'm in persecutor mode, I tend to be unconsciously asserting my power and trying to prove that I'm right. To shift to challenger, we need to make sure we're grounded in the intention of love and the desire to truly support the individual's growth. So try it. Next time you find yourself persecuting, ask yourself the question, what's my intention right now? And shift yourself to challenger. All right, so the next shift is from rescuer to coach. So assume you're in rescuer mode. Remember, the problem with a rescuer orientation is that you don't think the person with whom you're interacting is capable of doing fine without your help. You're putting them into a victim role. So to shift to coach, ask yourself this question. Do I believe the person I'm serving is whole without me? A coach treats everyone as a creator, totally whole and capable of solving their own problems. With that mindset, no one needs to be rescued. So now that we've looked at the three shifts, victim to creator, persecutor to challenger, and rescuer to coach, let's look at the next big idea, rubber bands and your ideals. Quote, the way you create any outcome in your life is to hold the vision of your deepest desires. At the same time, though, you must honestly and accurately assess your current situation and how it relates to your greater vision. By doing this, you engage tension between what is and what can be. This tension is the primary creative force behind the manifestation of any outcome. It's as natural and powerful as the force of gravity. End quote. So if you want to get the feel for this, pick up a rubber band. Imagining it will be just fine if you don't happen to have one. And put the rubber band between the biggest finger on each of your hands. Pull your fingers apart, stretching the rubber band. Now imagine that your right hand is your ideal, pulling away from your left hand, which is your current situation. Can you feel that tension? Nice. Now that tension between your fingers is the same type of tension that exists when you dare to dream and envision your ideal life. The moment we do that, we create what Ted calls dynamic tension between our ideal and our current reality. Here's the challenge. What do we want to do when we feel that tension between our fingers and between our ideal and where we are? We want to relieve it, right? As Ted advises, quote, in the case of dynamic tension, you can resolve the tension in either direction. You can let go of your vision and snap back toward your current reality, or you can move from your current situation toward your vision, end quote. As victims, we compromise our ideal vision, and then we complain that someone's persecuting us. As creators, we know that, quote, it's impossible to invest your soul in a compromise, end quote. So we hold that tension and take what Ted calls baby steps toward our goal, which is the next big idea, baby steps. Quote, it is the baby steps you take, the everyday things you do, that eventually lead to the manifestation of your outcome, end quote. It's so easy to throw up our hands and walk away when we feel stressed or overwhelmed, turning to the nearest rescuer, whether it's, again, the TV, a drink, sex, to numb ourselves from the pain of holding the tension. As you know, that's not a good idea. We've got to remember to put ourselves into creator mode. Ask ourselves, what do I want? And then figure out what the next thing is that we need to do. I love the way Byron Katie describes it. She calls it doing the dishes. And she says, what I call doing the dishes is the practice of loving the task in front of you. Your inner voice guides you all day long to do simple things such as brush your teeth, drive to work, call your friend, or do the dishes. Even though it's just another story, it's a very short story. And when you follow the direction of the voice, the story ends. We're really alive when we live as simply as that, open, waiting, trusting, and loving to do what appears in front of us now. What we need to do unfolds before us always. Doing the dishes, paying the bills, picking up the children's socks, brushing our teeth. We never receive more than we can handle, and there is always just one thing to do. Whether you have $10 or $10 million, life never gets more difficult than that. That great thought is from Byron Katie's great book, Loving What Is. Brilliant stuff. The fact is, we pretty much always know what we need to do next. The problem is that we often ignore that inner guidance system. And as Katie says, When a thought appears, such as do the dishes, and you don't do them, notice how an internal war breaks out. The stress and weariness you feel are really mental combat fatigue. So, what's your next baby step? And as Emerald says, some of the steps you take may end up being detours or out-and-out mistakes. But by staying focused on your vision, though, you'll find even those steps useful in the creating process. End quote. The next big idea and final big idea is souls and compromises. Quote, it's impossible to invest your soul in a compromise. End quote. Powerful. So I've barely scratched the surface of the wisdom packed into this tiny little book, and I truly hope you'll spend some time diving deeper into the power of TED. My final questions for you. What is your ideal? What are you investing your soul in? And what's your next baby step? In living those questions and creating our ideals, I sign off on this philosopher's note. So now let's take a quick look at the author of The Power of TED, David Emerald, who is a confirmed creator who once viewed life through the eyes of a victim. He makes his home on a peaceful island in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, where he likes to walk the beach and imagine the best of all possible futures. That's from the book. And you can check out all things TED at powerofted.com. And if you like this note, I also think you'll enjoy the notes on the path of least resistance, mastery, the gifted adult, the 7 habits of highly effective people, and man's search for meaning. All right, that wraps up this quick look at a great book. Remember your DDT, victim, persecutor, and rescuer, and the antidote, the power of TED, the empowerment dynamic, which is constituted by, as you now know, the creator, the challenger, and the coach. So let's not invest our soul in a compromise and go out there and create our ideal lives. Have an awesome day. Look forward to sharing more with you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this Philosopher's Note. Please go to www.philosophersnotes.com to download more.